Hey guys, we are reading Proverbs 16 to 20 today. We are still continuing. We're still in the middle of what is this one called again? So far, Proverbs of Solomon. I don't think I explained anything about Solomon before, guys, so I'm just going to give you a little backstory. So Solomon was David's. We talked about David a lot. He did basically all the Psalms, and then Proverbs is from his son Solomon. So Solomon became king when he was very young. I can't remember why David. Let's look this up. Why was Solomon king at such a young age? How old was Solomon when he became king? At Solomon's death, his son Rehoboam took the throne and was aged 41 years. That means Solomon was about 19 when Rehoboam was born. The age of Solomon is not recorded. However, what is this? There it is said Solomon was king of Israel when he was 12 years old, and Josiah is uprightness when 8. Okay, so why did David prepares Solomon to succeed him as king? Let's read this. So this is theologyofwork.org. Come on. Okay. So this is in 1 Kings 1 verse and 1 Chronicles 22. Because David had shed so much blood as king, God determined not to allow him to build a house for the Lord. Instead, David's son Solomon was given that task. So David accepted that his final task was to train Solomon for the job of king and to surround him with a capable team. David provided the vast stores of materials for the construction of God's temple in Jerusalem, saying, "My son Solomon is young and inexperienced, and the house that is to be built for the Lord must be exceedingly magnificent." He publicly passed authority to Solomon and made sure that the leaders of Israel acknowledged Solomon as the new king and were prepared to help him succeed. David recognized that leadership is responsibility that outlasts one's own career. In most cases, your work will continue after you have moved on, whether by promotion, retirement, or taking a different job. You have a duty to create the conditions your successor needs to be successful. In David's preparation for Solomon, we see 3 elements of successful succession planning. First, you need to provide the resources your successor needs to complete the tasks you leave unfinished. If you have been at least moderately successful, you will have learned how to gather the resources needed in your position. Often this depends on relationships that your successor will not immediately inherit. For example, success may depend on assistance from people who do not work in your department, but who have been willing to help you in your work. You need to make sure your successor knows who these people are, and you need to get their commitment to continue helping after you are gone. David arranged for all kinds of artisans he had developed relationships with to work for Solomon after he was gone. Second, you need to impart your knowledge and relationships to the person who succeeds you. In many situations, this will come by bringing your successor to work alongside you long before you depart. David began including Solomon in the leadership structures and rituals of the kingdom shortly before David's death. Although it appears he could have done a much better job of this if he'd started earlier. In other cases, you may not have any role in designating your successor, and you may not have any overlap with him or her. In that case, you'll need to pass on information in writing and through those who will remain in the organization. What can you do to prepare the work and your successor to thrive for God's glory after you're gone? Third, you need to transfer power decisively to that person who takes over the position. Whether you choose your own successor or whether others make that decision without your input, you still have a choice whether or not to publicly acknowledge the transition and definitively pass on the authority you previously had. Your words and actions will confer either a blessing or a curse on your successor. A recent example is the manipulation that Vladimir Putin engaged in to maintain power after term limitations prevented him from seeking a 3rd consecutive term as president of Russia. He arranged for some of the president's powers to be transferred to the prime minister, then used his influence to get a former subordinate elected president who appointed Putin as prime minister immediately afterwards. After one term, he's an evil genius. After one term as prime minister, Putin easily stepped in as president again at the invitation of the incumbent who stepped aside. As a result, concentration power in Putin's hands has continued unabated for decades. Just what term limits are intended to prevent, quite possibly to the detriment of Russia and its neighbors. In contrast, David arranged for Solomon to be publicly anointed as king, transferred the symbols of monarchy to him, and presented him publicly as the new king while David himself was still living. Sorry, guys, I'm going to get a little political for just a second because I know so many people love Trump. All right, so this is September 14th, 2020. Trump's mysterious relationship with Putin. Precious fucking Trump. Look how happy they look. They're like best friends. Hitler would be right there with him if he were still alive. Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump meeting in the 2017 G20 Hamburg summit. After Trump's nearly 4 years as president, there is still no obvious reason he defers to Putin on major issues. It is a chief question that the United States faces as a country, but there are clues, the essayist writes. Let's find out what they are, guys. After President Trump's nearly 4 years in office, we still do not have a good answer as to why the president has repeatedly deferred to Vladimir Putin on major issues. This is a central question that we face as a country, especially its consequences for American policies on Ukrainian sanctions. On the issue of Russian meddling in the 2016 presidential election, if anybody saw that documentary, it's on Netflix. It's very good. I highly recommend it. On the trustworthiness of our United States intelligence agency. Recently, also on the contretemps over possible Russian bounties for the killing of American soldiers in Afghanistan, and finally on the U.S. presidential election. As these scandals flare and recede into the next crisis, our focus on solving this mystery seems to subside as well. We must not lose our attentiveness to what is behind Trump's baffling relationship with Putin. Our national security depends on it. Although we have no official answer, we have a set of clues stretching back decades. Trump himself has admitted it over and over again. He wants to build a Trump Tower in Moscow. That has been his ambition since July 1987. Big goals, Trump. When he made his first journey to the Russian capital, nothing indicates that has changed since he took office. Financial observers speculate that he could conceivably earn up to $300 million in licensing fees and other revenues for the project, the payoff he has been seeking all his life. As a self-proclaimed multi-billionaire businessman and a famously boastful deal maker, Trump has been on the prowl insatiably for a real estate prize that will display his superior talents and enhance his already self-described billions of dollars in wealth. Trump's hunt for treasures in Russia, though, has been bumpy from the start. In his first go-around 33 years ago, Trump visited Moscow with his wife at the time, Ivana, a Russian speaker, on the invitation of the Soviet ambassador to the U.S., Yuri Dubinin, to investigate developing a hotel. Nothing came of the visit. 9 years later, in 1996, Trump returned to Moscow on his own, scouting out hotel and residential sites. He proposed at the time to invest $250 million in Russia, still economically raw after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and put his name on 2 Moscow luxury buildings. While there, he also registered his trademark, thereby protecting the names Trump Tower and other Trump monikers. His plan, once again, went nowhere. 10 years elapsed before another spurt of activity. Trump sent his children to Moscow in 2006, first Ivanka and later Donald Jr., who alone made 6 trips over an 18-month period. Trump himself went to Moscow in 2007 to announce that he was establishing Trump Vodka. Still no progress on the main real estate prize. In November 2013, Trump made a spectacle in Moscow by hosting the Miss Universe pageant. He used the occasion to seek out many more top Russian officials for an agreement on a potential Trump Tower. At one point, he even sought a meeting with Putin himself, but failed. He once more came away empty-handed, but he did not give up. The next year, he again sent Ivanka and her now husband Jared Kushner to Moscow to look again for a site for a Trump Tower. In 2015, even as he began his campaign for the Republican presidential nomination, he was still searching for a Russian partner. He instructed his emissaries to continue working their various contacts in Moscow. Now he proposed a Trump Tower that would be a bold glass obelisk, 100 stories high. By October, he signed, sounds like he's trying to build a tower to God. By October, he signed a non-binding letter of intent to construct his building. In January 2016, even as the Republican primaries were underway, he asked Michael Cohen, his erstwhile personal lawyer, to offer Putin a free penthouse valued at $50 million atop his planned tower. Over the next 6 months, Cohen kept in touch with various key Russians about the venture. Cohen later claimed to the Mueller investigation that he had dropped his Moscow efforts in January, but eventually admitted that he had, in fact, persisted with them through June 2016. In late November 2018, almost 2 years into his presidency, Trump confessed that he kept trying for the Moscow deal throughout his campaign because he figured that should he lose, he would still be able to return to it and conclude an agreement. I'm glad you had a backup plan. You're such a smart businessman, Trump. Now, 2 years later, and in the midst of another presidential election year, we no longer hear discussions about a possible Trump Tower in Moscow. After 33 years of persistent effort, is it truly possible that Trump has given up on his quest? I doubt it. Trump and Putin have had more FaceTime during his nearly 4 years in office than they had any time before Trump's inauguration. So he became president so he could actually meet Putin. Interesting. What exactly have Trump and Putin talked about during their series of personal meetings held in the strictest secrecy during Trump's time in office? We can never really know until the contents of his meetings with Putin are made public. Yet the answer remains critical to our democracy and national security. Hell yes, it does. As another instance of Trump's soft pedaling criticisms of Russia comes and goes, we must not stop asking questions about Trump's long-curious embrace of Putin. The answer may be lying in the development plans of the ever-elusive Trump Tower in Moscow. So that was by Stephen Schlesinger, who won the 2004 Harry S. Truman Book Award. He's written 3 books. One was The Act of Creation, The Founding of the United Nations. He's a senior fellow at the Century Foundation in New York City and a former director of World Policy Institute at the New School and a former publisher of the quarterly magazine, The World Policy Journal. He started and published the New Democrat magazine, was a speechwriter for the Democratic presidential candidate, George McGovern, and later was weekly columnist for the Boston Globe's The Literary Life. He wrote Stephen Kinzer's Bitter Fruit, a book about the 1954 CIA coup in Guatemala. He spent 4 years as a staff writer at Time magazine. For 12 years, he served as the New York State governor, Mario Cuomo's speechwriter, and foreign policy advisor. In the mid-90s, he worked for the United Nations at Habitat, an agency dealing with cities. He has a BA from Harvard, a certificate of study from Cambridge, and a JD from Harvard Law School. And he lives in New York City. So he seems pretty reputable to me. Okay. What else did I want to search? I think that's enough for now. You guys can research the rest. Let's get into the Bible. Okay. So we are in chapter 16. So Solomon, okay, so back to this. So Solomon was the best king of all the kings. Even though he was a king at 12 and he was inexperienced, he was trained by David, which was God's literally his favorite person. But God punished David like he did Adam and Eve and like he's done everybody else. Because none of us are perfect, even though he loves us and he loves us technically all equally, but I mean, every parent I feel like has favorite children. So David was definitely God's favorite child, just like Adam and Eve were his first children. So, anyway, so Solomon was David's child and son, and it was the son that was chosen to rule after him when he be his successor. So, Solomon, because he had literally the perfect dad, obviously he made some mistakes and he didn't get to rule as long as he wanted to. And he spent a lot of years in a cave, a lot of years in a cave writing songs and psalms to God, and hiding and running. And he still had like an unshakable faith in God. So Solomon was his son. I believe it was his and Bathsheba's son. Was he Bathsheba's son? Let's look this up. Was Solomon Bathsheba, sorry, I'm spelling it wrong. Bathsheba and David's son. David married the widow Bathsheba, but their first child died as punishment from God for David's adultery and murder of Uriah. David repented of his sins, and Bathsheba later gave birth to Solomon. Okay, so Solomon was their first child. He was born in Bethlehem, West Bank in 96 BCE, Jerusalem, Israel. So Bathsheba was the woman who was bathing on like the roof of her home, and David saw her because it was a freaking peeping Tom and was like, I want her. She's so like beautiful and sexy and whatever. Like, I want her now. Bring her to my like king's chambers. So like doesn't check if this woman's married. She is married. Brings her there, seduces her. They have sex, and like her husband is serving in the war. He like finds this out, freaks out, like she's pregnant, and so like he like needs to get rid of this problem, and so like he puts him in the front line of like the army and like kills him. Like he dies instantly. Like, and they know that's gonna happen. And so like his friend or servant comes and like tries to like tell him like his sin, because he doesn't think he did anything wrong, because then he takes Bathsheba as his wife and they're pregnant. And so like basically like David finally realizes that he sins, and then God's like, you're not going to keep this child. Like, this child was conceived out of wedlock. You killed her husband. Like, you did a horrible thing, David. Like, you took someone else's wife. You had sex with her. You made her commit adultery. And like, then you killed her husband. So like, you don't get this baby. So first baby died. And obviously that was like devastating. And like, David felt horrible. And like, he like prayed and like asked for forgiveness, and God obviously forgave him, and then gave him this like perfect son who was going to be the perfect ruler, Solomon. So Solomon at 12, like he's learning all these things from his dad, like who's preparing him to be his successor. And then he asked God for literally like the like most genius thing you can ask God for. He asked God for wisdom, guys. Like, he knew he was going to be a young king, but he wanted to be a good king. And instead of asking for riches or wealth or anything else, beautiful women, like whatever, like he asked God to be wise. He's like, God, make me wise. And he made him wise. He made him the wisest king that has ever existed in the history of all kings, is King Solomon. He was the wisest king and like one of the youngest kings. Like, he wasn't the youngest king. I guess one was like 9, but he was 12 years old. He obviously was inexperienced and still a child. So like, this like middle school 6th grade age child is like ruling like an entire kingdom, and he's in charge of building like God's house and like all this stuff. So like he's like, he just asked God for wisdom, and God's like, this is a noble request. I'm gonna honor this. Like, nobody asked for wisdom. I'm gonna give it to you, kid. So like he gave him wisdom, and he was a wise and good ruler. And so that's what Proverbs is Solomon's. It's like Solomon's story of wisdom. So everything we're sharing with you was like told to Solomon, and he used to rule, and he ruled well, and he ruled wisely, and he was one of like the last good like wise kings. Like, we've obviously had good kings and like good princesses and good queens and whatever since then, but like nobody can hold a candle to Solomon. Like, they just can't. It's not possible. Okay, so chapter 16, this is more of Solomon like sharing his wisdom with us. To man belong the plans of the heart, but from the Lord comes the reply of the tongue. All a man's ways seem innocent to him, but motives are weighed by the Lord. Commit to the Lord whatever you do, and your plans will succeed. The Lord works out everything for his own ends, even the wicked for a day of disaster. The Lord detests all the proud of the heart. Be sure of this. They will not go unpunished. Through love and faithfulness, sin is atoned for. Through the fear of the Lord, a man avoids evil. When a man's ways are pleasing to the Lord, he makes even his enemies live at peace with him. Better a little with righteousness than much gain with injustice. In his heart a man plans his course, but the Lord determines his steps. The lips of a king speak as an oracle, and his mouth should not betray justice. Honest scales and balances are from the Lord. All the weights in the bag are of his making. Kings detest wrongdoing, for a throne is established through righteousness. Kings take pleasure in honest lips. They value a man who speaks the truth. A king's wrath is a messenger of death, but a wise man will appease it. When a king's face brightens, it means life. His favor is like a rain cloud in spring. How much better to get wisdom than gold, to choose understanding rather than silver. The highway of the upright avoids evil. He who guards his way guards his life. Pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. Better to be lowly in spirit and among the oppressed than to share plunder with the proud. Whoever gives heed to instruction prospers, and blessed is he who trusts the Lord. The wise in heart are called discerning, and pleasant words promote instruction. Understanding is a fountain of life to those who have it, but folly brings punishment to fools. A wise man's heart guides his mouth, and his lips promote instruction. Pleasant words are a honeycomb, sweet to the soul and healing to the bones. There is a way that seems right to a man, but in the end it leads to death. The laborer's appetite works for him, his hunger drives him on. A scoundrel plots evil, and his speech is like a scorching fire. A perverse man stirs up dissension, and a gossip separates close friends. A violent man entices his neighbor and leads him down a path that is not good. He who winks with his eye is plotting perversity. He who purses his lips is bent on evil. Gray hair is a crown of splendor. It is attained by a righteous life. Better a patient man than a warrior, a man who controls his temper than one who takes a city. The lot is cast into the lap, but its every decision is from the Lord. Better a dry crust with peace and quiet than a house full of feasting with strife. A wise servant will rule over a disgraceful son and will share the inheritance as one of the brothers. The crucible for silver and furnace for gold, but the Lord tests the heart. Oh, wait, sorry, we're in chapter 17. I don't know if I announced that. A wicked man listens to evil lips. A liar pays attention to a malicious tongue. He who mocks the poor shows contempt for their maker. Whoever gloats over disaster will not go unpunished. Children's children are a crown to the aged, and parents are the pride of their children. Arrogant lips are unsuited to a fool. How much worse lying lips to a ruler. A bribe is a charm to the one who gives it. Wherever he turns, he succeeds. He who covers over an offense promotes love, but whoever repeats the matter separates close friends. A rebuke impresses a man of discernment. More than 100 lashes a fool. An evil man is bent only on rebellion. A merciless official will be sent against him. Better to meet a bear robbed of her cubs than a fool in his folly. If a man pays back evil for good, evil will never leave his house. Starting a quarrel is like breaching a dam, so drop the matter before a dispute breaks out. Acquitting the guilty and condemning the innocent, the Lord detests them both. Of what use is money in the hand of a fool, since he has no desire to get wisdom? A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. A man lacking in judgment strikes hands in pledge and puts up security for his neighbor. He who loves a quarrel loves sin. He who builds a high gate invites destruction. A man of perverse heart does not prosper. He whose tongue is deceitful falls into trouble. To have a fool for a son brings grief. There is no joy for the father of a fool. A cheerful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up the bones. A wicked man accepts a bribe in secret to pervert the course of justice. A discerning man keeps wisdom in view, but a fool's eyes wander to the ends of the earth. A foolish son brings grief to his father and bitterness to the one who bore him. It is not good to punish an innocent man or to flog officials for their integrity. A man of knowledge uses words with restraint, and a man of understanding is even-tempered. Even a fool is thought wise if he keeps silent, and discerning if he holds his tongue. Chapter 18. Devotion. Okay. Proverbs, the verse is Proverbs 17, verse 6. The passage is Proverbs 17, verse 1 to 6. The author is Nancy Corbett Cole. Grandmother, grandma, a glorious crown. I will never forget the day my first grandchild, Lindsay, was born. What a happy time. After all the years of raising my own children with all the struggles, I can now see the fruits of my labors in my grandchildren. It was as though life cycle was completed. First, I was a child, then a married adult, then a mother, and then my children were reproducing tiny composites of genes with some of me in them. When that first squeaky came from Lindsay's mouth, sweet music. Then there were 2 more babies, then 4 and 5. Now we have 7 grandchildren. When I hear of people who have perhaps 20 grandchildren, or family reunions with as many as 500 people, I think how fortunate they are, especially if the original mother and father instilled godly values into their children, who also did the same with their children. Every individual in a family counts. The beauty of family does not have to be blighted when there has been divorce and remarriage. We can accept stepchildren and love them unconditionally, just as we do those who are born into the family. Everyone needs acceptance in a child of divorce. Death or abandonment needs more attention than those born into the family naturally. It is easy to favor one above another, particularly those who share our physical characteristics or disposition, characteristics that we securely admire in ourselves, but we must love them all equally. I admire greatly those grandparents who, because of circumstances, are raising their grandchildren. I read of a famous athlete who attributed all of his success to his grandmother who raised him. What a struggle, but how rewarding. The Bible says that an old man's and woman's grandchildren are his crowning glory. What a privilege to wear that glorious crown. Okay, chapter 18. An unfriendly man pursues selfish ends. He defies all sound judgment. A fool finds no pleasure in understanding, but delights in airing his own opinions. When wickedness comes, so does contempt, and with shame comes disgrace. The words of a man's mouth are deep waters, but the fountain of wisdom is a bubbling brook. It is not good to be partial to the wicked, or to deprive the innocent of justice. A fool's lips bring him strife, and his mouth invites a beating. A fool's mouth is his undoing, and his lips are a snare to his soul. The words of a gossip are like choice morsels. They go down to a man's inmost parts. One who is slack in his work is brother to one who destroys. The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous run to it and are safe. The wealth of the rich is their fortified city. They imagine it an unscalable wall. Before his downfall, a man's heart is proud, but humility comes before honor. He who answers before listening, that is his folly and his shame. A man's spirit sustains him in sickness, but a crushed spirit who can bear? The heart of the discerning acquires knowledge. The ears of the wise seek it out. A gift opens the way for the giver and ushers him into the presence of the great. The first to present his case seems right, till another comes forward and questions him. Casting the lot settles disputes and keeps strong opponents apart. An offended brother is more unyielding than a fortified city, and disputes all like the barred gates of a citadel. From the fruit of his mouth a man's stomach is filled. With the harvest from his lips he is satisfied. The tongue has the power of life and death, and those who love it will eat its fruit. He who finds a wife finds what is good, and receives favor from the Lord. A poor man pleads for mercy, but a rich man answers harshly. A man of many companions may come to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. Chapter 19. Better a poor man whose walk is blameless than a fool whose lips are perverse. It is not good to have zeal without knowledge, nor to be hasty and miss the way. A man's own folly ruins his life, yet his heart rages against the Lord. Wealth brings many friends, but a poor man's friend deserts him. A false witness will not go unpunished, and he who pours out lies will not go free. Many curry favor with a ruler, and everyone is the friend of a man who gives gifts. A poor man is shunned by all his relatives. How much more do his friends avoid him? Though he pursues them with pleading, they are nowhere to be found. He who gets wisdom loves his own soul. He who cherishes understanding prospers. A false witness will not go unpunished, and he who pours out lies will perish. It is not fitting for a fool to live in luxury. How much worse for a slave to rule over princes. A man's wisdom gives him patience. It is to his glory to overlook an offense. A king's rage is like the roar of a lion, but his favor is like dew on the grass. A foolish son is his father's ruin, and a quarrelsome wife is like a constant dripping. Houses and wealth are inherited from parents, but a prudent wife is from the Lord. Laziness brings on deep sleep, and the shiftless man goes hungry. He who obeys instructions guards his life, but he who is contemptuous of his ways will die. He who is kind to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will reward him for what he has done. Discipline your son, for in that there is hope. Do not be a willing party to his death. A hot-tempered man must pay the penalty. If you rescue him, you will have to do it again. Listen to advice and accept instruction, and in the end you will be wise. Many are the plans in a man's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails. What a man desires is unfailing love. Better to be poor than a liar. The fear of the Lord leads to life, than one rests content, untouched by trouble. The sluggard buries his hand in the dish. He will not even bring it back to his mouth. Flog a mocker, and the simple will learn prudence. Rebuke a discerning man, and he will gain knowledge. He who robs his father and drives out his mother is a son who brings shame and disgrace. Stop listening to instruction, my son, and you will stray from the words of knowledge. A corrupt witness mocks at justice, and the mouth of the wicked gulps down evil. Penalties are prepared for mockers, and beatings for the backs of fools. Devotion. Verse, Proverbs 19, verse 11. Passage, Proverbs 19, verse 1 to 11. Author, Jean Zorns. The Waiting Game. Impatient people are like cats petted backwards, apt to yowl over the discomfort of things not done right or not done at all. But Proverbs 19, verse 11 spells out the divine imperative. A man's wisdom gives him patience. It is to his glory to overlook an offense. Unlike jigsaw puzzles, people don't always fit together perfectly. Everyone's personality has unique ins and outs. Some are busy, get-it-done types for whom people are means to an end. Others are more laid back. They talk about getting something done, but never quite get to it. To them, people and relationships are the end. When these two types get together, they can despair over the other's failures, blind to their own, or they can see those conflicts as opportunities for their own growth. Single until her mid-30s, Dora had numerous roommates who stretched her comfort zone. I like the dishes always done and the floor vacuumed, she says, but the Lord needed to expose my inflexibility. The roommates he sent were my opposites. They lived on the telephone and were blind to dust, but they also drew me out of myself and taught me how to care for people. In my family, cartoons help us celebrate our differences and be patient with one another. Any comic strip that hits home is clipped and posted on the refrigerator for laughs. Then I paste it in a notebook kept with the family photo albums for repeat laughs and long-term reminders of how human we all really are. It's a good idea. Okay, chapter 20. Last one, guys. Wine is a mocker and beer a brawler. Whoever is led astray by them is not wise. A king's wrath is like the roar of a lion. He who angers him forfeits his life. It is to a man's honor to avoid strife, but every fool is quick to quarrel. A sluggard does not plow in season, so at harvest time he looks but finds nothing. The purposes of a man's heart are deep waters, but a man of understanding draws them out. Many a man claims to have unfailing love, but a faithful man who can find? The righteous man leads a blameless life. Blessed are his children after him. When a king sits on his throne to judge, he winnows out all evil with his eyes. Who can say, I have kept my heart pure? I am clean and without sin. Differing weights and differing measures, the Lord detests them both. Even a child is known by his actions, by whether his conduct is pure and right. Ears that hear and eyes that see, the Lord has made them both. Do not love sleep, or you will grow poor. Stay awake, and you will have food to spare. It's no good, says the buyer. Then off he goes and boasts about his purchase. Gold there is, and rubies in abundance, but lips that speak knowledge are a rare jewel. Take the garment of one who puts up security for a stranger. Hold it in pledge if he does it for a wayward woman. Food gained by fraud tastes sweet to a man, but he ends up with a mouth full of gravel. Make plans by seeking advice if you wage war. Obtain guidance. A gossip betrays a confidence, so avoid a man who talks too much. If a man curses his father or mother, his lamp will be snuffed out in pitch darkness. An inheritance quickly gained at the beginning will not be blessed at the end. Do not say, I'll pay you back for this wrong. Wait for the Lord, and he will deliver you. The Lord detests differing weights, and dishonest scales do not please him. A man's steps are directed by the Lord. How then can anyone understand his own way? It is a trap for a man to dedicate something rashly and only later to consider his vows. A wise king winnows out the wicked. He drives the threshing wheel over them. The Lamb of the Lord searches the spirit of a man. It searches out his inmost being. Love and faithfulness keep a king safe. Through love, his throne is made secure. The glory of young men is their strength. Gray hair, the splendor of the old. Blows and wounds cleanse away evil, and beatings purge the inmost being. All right, guys, that takes us to 21. Again, there's only 31 Proverbs, so we have 10 left. That's it for today, guys. Later.